We're on now. Hey, Emanuele, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me okay as well? I hope my connection is better this time.
Looks like it. Sounds like it.
Sweet. Now the recording is on as well, so we can get started. So how's your week, Emma? Are you having a good week? Anything exciting going on? Fishing for
No
alpha.
more nor less. Well, no more nor less than the usual. This week has been rather slow, I would say, considering that it has been vacation here in the Netherlands. So today is the first day of the week, in fact. But there are a lot of things that are happening and a lot of stuff going on, of course. So a lot of reasons to stay excited.
Always excited about what's coming up, especially when I hear all the good stuff you always talk about. But without further ado, I guess we can go into some of the questions for the community, just because we're already kind of 10 minutes in, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time that's here. So let's just get into it. I see there's quite a lot of questions in the AMA channel, and a couple of pretty good ones. So let's start with the first one. The first one is asking, so Dusk is focusing now to be as minimal infra as possible, but with L2s, will there be any bottlenecks? What about interoperability when this architecture details will be released? That's the first couple of questions.
Okay, that's kind of a mix of different kind of questions. So let's break this down into the three parts of these questions, right? So from an architectural perspective, our strategic goal is to basically just having an architecture that at some point is self-sustainable and is I wouldn't call it minimalistic, because that is not really the goal, but definitely maintainable and secure. And in order for anything to be secure, then you need to limit as much as possible the attack surface, right? So the vulnerability surface. And this happens when you have a protocol that is simpler to reason about. Now, a monolithic protocol, or I don't really like to talk about monolithic because it doesn't really make much sense, but a compact protocol in which you have data availability, consensus, and execution layers all in one, all in the different nodes. Well, there are many different advantages in that kind of configuration. However, it is basically normally a little more involved from a code perspective. So from a simplicity perspective of the code, from ease of ease of reasoning and maintainability, then it's not really the easiest stack to reason about, because there are many different components that do many different things. And of course, when they all interconnect and interoperate for different reasons, I can look at myself now. Oh, very nice. When you have that, when you have many different components that do, that carry on the operations of a network, then it's a little more difficult to reason about those. And the complexity just bubbles up, and by bubbling up the complexity, then normally what you have is also something which takes more time in order to ensure security, right? If instead you have different kind of components that absolve a very that do one thing well, then normally the complexity is actually kept at bay, and there is more maintainability overall. So when you have an execution layer, or rather a network that is an application layer, and that doesn't do anything with the consensus or the data availability and delegates that to its own dedicated infrastructure, and the dedicated infrastructure does only that, does consensus and data availability, and receives and doesn't really concern itself with the execution layer, then at that particular point in time, that is where you have two different networks that do one thing and they try to do one thing well. So this is what we are tending toward. We are not quite there, even when we have the EVM chain, when we have DuskEVM. And by the way, I don't really like to talk about DuskEVM because, as a matter of fact, Dusk will be the EVM execution layer and the settlement layer. And then at some point, we will also have the privacy-preserving execution layer, right? So all of that is Dusk. It's not that Dusk is only the layer one and the DuskEVM is something else. No, it's Dusk. Only having a different modularity concept that basically powers the overall network. And you have a completely different sharded network, in fact, and not sharded in terms of data, because at the moment you have Moonlight and Phoenix, which are essentially a logical shard, but you also have a physical shard because you have two different kind of networks, right? So at that particular point in time, it's quite like the account model lives in its own network, the Phoenix model lives in its own network, and basically the settlement layer makes sure that data is available and transactions, as well as state transitions, are in fact are ergonomically correct and verifiable, which is essentially what layer 2s are for. But all of it is Dusk. Right. Whereas on Ethereum, for instance, or any other chain, you have Ethereum that is the settlement layer, and then everything else is a different network. Why? Because Ethereum needs to cater to, arbitrary layer 2s, and layer 2s are networks that are essentially on their own. In our case, basically, these networks are canonical for the Dusk stack, and that's why. So simplicity is what we are tending to strategically, but it's not basically the current motivation why we are doing what we are doing at the moment.
Right.
There were other two parts of to the question. Where are the other two?
So with the layer 2s, will there be any bottlenecks? And what about interoperability? Okay,
so bottlenecks on layer 2. Well, the only bottleneck that I can think of basically is the finality of the transactions that are on the layer 2, right? Why? Because layer 2 works in the following way. There is a sequencer, whether this is a decentralized sequencer, a centralized sequencer, there is a round robin of sequencers, a group of sequencers, doesn't matter. So there is a sequencer which at some point basically just gets all the different transactions, crunches them in order to create one state transition, and then basically just communicates the metadata toward the transactions that, in fact, gave birth to the state transition to the settlement layer. Because of that, then, there are two different phases. One is the collection of transactions, and the other one is basically the communication of the state transition to the settlement layer. So this is a step more than what goes on the compact Dusk that is right now, right? So at the moment, there are only transactions, and then the block generator, by posting the block of transactions, essentially it posts an implicit state transition. So they aren't really two different phases. So if you will, you can think about a bottleneck in that sense, about the fact that basically all this transaction needs to first create a state transition, and then the state transition is, in fact, presented to the settlement layer, so to the layer 1. However, it is also true that while it is true that there is this step in between, why there is this step in between? Well, there is this step in between because essentially we go from a place or from an architecture in which there are, all the different kind of state transition that each transaction brings. These are all collected by an entity, which is the sequencer. So what needs to be proven is only essentially one big transaction that basically is the state transition. And this is also why layer 2 normally are solutions that are used for scaling. So from a perspective of bottlenecks, there is definitely, again, a step in between, which we do not have on compact architectures. However, this step in between makes sure that we can, in fact, execute many more transactions to the order of, thousands per second. Does this matter? Not really, because before getting to thousands of transactions or the need to fill thousands of transactions per second, then we definitely need to have a lot more activity on the network, and we will ramp up gradually, hopefully toward those heights. But at the same time, it's nice to know that kind of scalability is there. It is nice to know that if we want to do an on-chain order book, and by the way, that is definitely the intention for security transactions, then we have that capability. And at the moment, that would be quite challenging without the scalability optimizations and gains that the new architecture is basically bringing to us. So from a bottleneck perspective, I would confidently say that we don't really see it, apart from bottleneck in development, of course, because we need to make sure that basically the EVM execution layer works. For what concerns interoperability, well, the main point about having an EVM compatible network that as an execution layer, so an application layer, is to be interoperable with the entirety of the EVM ecosystem. I'm not only talking about Ethereum, but I'm talking about all the different kind of layer 2s on Ethereum, like Optimism, Arbitrum, ZK Sync, and what have you, as well as basically all the other EVM networks that are not even on Ethereum, like Avalanche, Phantom, and what have you. So there are many of those. So interoperability is definitely one of the reasons why we are doing this. There is also another reason, which is the capability of using almost standardized tools. For instance, one of the tools that are used primarily and practically by a lot of different smart contract developers are the Zeppelin. Are the Open Zeppelin tools, right, to create smart contracts on Ethereum, and those are quite standardized. We have contacts, we have connections with the guys at Open Zeppelin. We have been meeting them in several different occasions, and now that we have plans to roll out and launch an EVM execution layer, then we can make use of those tools too, so that anybody that wants to create wants to create smart contracts or application without really stepping too far off from what standardized templating already provides or scaffolding capabilities already available, they could use, then they can simply reuse all these different kind of tools and make sure that basically this gets deployed on Dusk, or rather the EVM execution layer of Dusk rather than Ethereum. And why would anyone want to do something like this? Well, simply because Dusk has its main two USP, has the license to provide the capabilities to any kind of security and heavily regulated assets like bonds, equity, and what have you. So real world assets, but not stable coin real world assets. I mean financial real world asset can be traded. And the second part has got to do also with privacy, which we are also extending to some extent to the EVM execution layer through Hedger. So the privacy-preserving interface for security assets, which extends basically the so-called T-Rex tokenization interface, which has been famously created by Tokeny, and draws heavily from Hedger, which is our own tokenization interface, which is far more complex, far more complete than T-Rex. But in this, since we are talking about the EVM, then we can extend the EVM capabilities with that. So these are the two USPs and the reason why somebody would want to create smart contracts on Dusk rather than the EVM and Ethereum.
Superb.
Sorry for the very long answer. The question was quite was quite complex to begin with.
No, I think that was perfect because that gives quite a whole idea of exactly what are the advantages of the EVM execution layer, the layer 2 execution layer on Dusk, the benefits, how good it is for scalability and growth going forward, and also, I think this is the first time that we've mentioned Hedger to the broad community. We did have a couple of discussion in the DuskETeers channel. So I think this is the first time we actually introduced it. So can you actually just give a brief description of what Hedger is? I know you already kind of did, but just for the broader audience, which hasn't really heard about Hedger so far.
Yeah. All right. So sorry, Jade, to front run you about announcing things. I know that I see you in the audience. Anyway, so it's not a mystery that we have been working since our inception on a privacy-preserving interface for security assets. And this privacy-preserving interface implements the main functionalities that the securitized assets, like a bond or like a stock or like an ETF, needs to have. The name of that interface is Hedger, which stands for Zero Knowledge Ledger. And Hedger makes heavy use of the Phoenix transaction model, which is an entirely privacy-preserving transaction model. So it doesn't only protect the confidentiality of the payload of the transaction, of any kind of smart contract, or in this case, basically securitized assets, but it also preserves and protects the anonymity of the transactors. Although it also proves that that essentially the sender of a transaction is in fact the one that created the transaction itself. Now, this is possible because on Dusk there are two different transaction models. One transaction model is called Moonlight and is an account-based model, basically meaning that all the different double spending is prevented by checking whether an account is in fact spending its own token, balance, whatever. Whereas the difference with Phoenix, which is an output-based system, is that there is a database of all the different kind of unspent output, regardless of who is spending those. So these unspent output are not linked to an account, and therefore there is no account on an output-based system. Dusk has both. One is called Moonlight, the account system. The other one is called Phoenix, which is the output-based system. Phoenix is required in order to have full privacy, whereas Moonlight or any account model cannot preserve the anonymity of the transactors. So Hedger was created for Phoenix. Moonlight, or the account model, was introduced only last year in Dusk in order to comply with not really with regulations, but to comply with the requirements of different exchanges that have been denying the listing of Dusk because of the privacy preserving aspect. And now that we are talking and we are moving forward with our plans for the EVM execution layer, then basically we can no longer use Hedger as is, because the EVM does not deal with output-based systems like Phoenix, and therefore we had to modify Hedger in order to work with an EVM network. Now, the good news is the fact that we have been able to do so to preserve the functionalities of Hedger. So we are among the first, I believe, to introduce privacy-preserving securitized assets on chain that use confidentiality. Of course, we cannot guarantee the anonymity of the transactors because, again, we are talking about the account-based model, but that's sort of a detail. So we were able to work out the confidentiality of the transaction itself and to have very, very, very good performance in doing so. So we moved from Hedger and we invented Hedger. Why Hedger, which is spelled with H-E? Because it uses homomorphic encryption. So homomorphic encryption is a privacy-preserving methodology that allows basically for transactors to transact without really leaking any information about what they are transacting through means of this homomorphic encryption. Now, the interesting thing is the fact that we use homomorphic encryption together with zero-knowledge proof. So it uses the best of both worlds. But zero-knowledge proof are used in order basically to prove that what gets transacted is lawful, is not a negative number. So there is no possibility of depleting anybody's account simply by sending minus 10 different assets. It proves anything and everything, for instance, that the transactors belong to a KYC set or a whitelist. It proves a lot of different things. But the interesting thing is the fact that not only we were able to translate Hedger, so complete zero-knowledge based asset tokenization interface to homomorphic one, but we were able also to speed up quite substantially the overall performance of the creation of these transactions. So, for instance, when you are sending shielded Dusk, you're not really using Hedger. You're using something quite simpler than Hedger in terms of constraints, but still it takes quite a long time to create the zero-knowledge proof that what you're transferring is in fact valid, and this proof is attached to the transaction. And normally, in order to do so, then you need to have a node or you need to have a prover. Whether you are using the one that Dusk puts at disposal of the community or you are using your own one, it is still quite a heavy operation. Whereas for Hedger, the capability of creating these zero-knowledge proofs together with the homomorphic encryption part is so performant and so quick then we can do it on the browser. And so far, basically, we have been seeing that on the normal browser wallet, web wallet, for instance, and then it takes 2 seconds to create basically the transaction. We are talking about an underpowered machine. So if somebody has got a good laptop or an M4 or something like that, then we are talking about sub-second performance here in order to create the transaction. And the proving of the transaction is actually even faster. At the moment, we have the verification of the proofs that for a Phoenix transaction takes 6 milliseconds. For what concern Hedger proofs, then these are going to take a fraction of that. probably in the microsecond range. Also because these are going to be done by validation, which means essentially that this would open up a lot of different other applications that we are looking at right now. So, and don't get excited because we are not rolling them out immediately, but definitely it is doable for us to give birth to the first obfuscated privacy-preserving order book for securities on-chain, which is essentially the overall reason why Dusk exists. So we have been just talking about it. It's there is a very strong feeling that this is doable, and we have also a way to implement that. But first, we are going to launch Hedger with normal transfer before getting into obfuscated dexes and all sorts of nice things. Now, the good news there is the fact that we believe that we can deploy Hedger together with the EVM execution layer, so probably together. If not, it's going to be just slightly afterwards, but at the moment we already implemented the logical Hedger, so we right now need a little more dressing around it, like how the UX is going to look like and these kind of things. So that is Hedger in a nutshell. TLDR, it is basically Zedger, but that uses homomorphic encryption, does not have anonymity of transactors, but it provides performances that are order of magnitudes better than canonical Zedger, and even obfuscated transfer and shielded transfer on Dusk.
That's amazing. Yeah, step by step, of course, but it's great to see the vision of what's planned and what this allows Dusk to do with Hedger going forward. So it's all coming in steps, guys, but it's going to be pretty exciting. And as Scripted mentions, 2 seconds is amazing because the Phoenix transactions take 90 seconds using his Dusk prover, it seems. So that is pretty great performance. And also welcome, Jade. I had to get you on board since you were in the audience. Sorry for pulling you in, but you're stuck here now. And don't worry, guys, we're going to put an article out with all the information about Hedger going forward in the, whenever we're closer to the launch date. Now, continuing with the questions. The next one is from Tiens, and he's asking, how positive and eager are the management of NPEX to start trading on Dusk? Are they as keen and motivated as the Dusk team?
Well, I am part and one of the main forces around the management of NPEX, and I can tell you that I am as keen as ever, basically having the entirety of the trading happening on Dusk. That's for sure. The rest, there is complete alignment, of course, with the other managers, essentially the C-level. As the CTO of NPEX, I am tasked basically with the strategic roadmap concerning the technical implementation, the technical part. But I also do have a lot to say about its business model. So because it's not that I am only the CTO of NPEX, I'm also, through Dusk, I am also one of the biggest shareholders. So I would say that it is safe to say that there is complete alignment there. Of course, NPEX is a very important piece of the puzzle. But it's not the only one, and it's definitely not the only venue that we are looking at and we are collaborating with. So there is always a little bit of a challenge to balance what might be perceived as a conflict of interest because of the very, very close relationship between Dusk and NPEX, But so far, I have to say that our relationship with Ampex has been helping rather than harming our, the adoption of Dusk. Yeah, that's basically what I can say about it.
Perfect. That's great to hear. The next question is from DSlides, and he says, I would like to add to Teams's question. With all the partners you are currently integrating, planning for integration, whatever stage you are in, how is this whole process going? And any communication problems or alignment problems between you and the partners? I'm just curious how smooth the process is. I'd imagine there is a steep learning curve for everyone.
Right. So the main, let's talk a little bit about the partners, right? Of course, I cannot name names, but some of those we have been talking in the past, and some of those have been announced, like for instance 21X. But again, it's not the only one. Now, when we are talking about partners, we are talking about venues. And we are talking about those that basically want to create assets or have use for assets, so that these assets can be brought on chain and can be presented to you, the community, and the investors. Now, when we're talking about partners, those are the main partners, 21X and Co. Those that create assets and put assets on the venues, like on 21X, on Ampex, on other kind of venues that we are going to connect toward, those are issuers. And there are quite some that we will interact with indirectly, because we will get their assets and we will basically tokenize their assets and we will put them on chain and do something with it. However, they are not partners to the same extent, basically, that BlackRock is not a partner of Ethereum. I think it's probably quite clear. So BlackRock assets, so the money market fund of BlackRock, they can use Ether for whatever reason, or they can be issued on a certain venue, but there is no communication between BlackRock money market fund and Ether, right? So when we are talking about partners, essentially, then either we are talking about those that we directly get in touch with and we do business, that we onboard onto Dusk, and we are not talking about all the different kind of asset issuers that are out there. We have a relationship with those. We talk to them. We basically listen to their needs, and we try to model our products based on what they actually need. But ultimately, they are the partners of the venues that we are talking about. And you will never hear from me about the fact that we partnered up with Euroclear. We will never do that. Okay, so when we are talking about partners, for instance, you need to understand exactly what we are talking about. Does that mean that we do not work with Euroclear? Yes. As a matter of fact, we are working with Euroclear right now. They know about that, about us. We know about them. We basically onboard stuff that have got to do with Euroclear. Why? Because Ampex uses Euroclear as a CSD. So if we want, Dusk, it's in some cases, like for instance with the hybrid model, to be used by Ampex on the back end, then Dusk needs to interoperate with Euroclear. Needs essentially to pull out assets from Euroclear and needs to basically place assets into Euroclear. This is already happening. But you will never hear from me about the fact that we partner up with Euroclear. Why? Because in the same way that we didn't partner up with Amazon and we are using their backend or their instances, because you will never hear me saying that we partner up with Microsoft because half of the nodes that MPEX is using are on Azure, and we have to work together with them, right? Same thing about, so when we're talking about partner, let's be very specific about what we are talking about. Fanek, for instance, they are not a partner of Dusk, but they will put their own assets on Dusk at some point if there will ever be ETFs on MPEX. Are we planning for that? Yes, maybe. Cannot really confirm nor deny these kind of things. But Fanek is not a partner and will never be. It doesn't matter if basically on the network of Dusk there will be 10 different kind of ETFs that are basically powered by Fanek or BlackRock or anything like that. We will have those. We are making plans to have those. They know that we exist. Well, you guys know about that. They are routinely invited into our events, but that doesn't mean that basically they are a partner. So who are the partners of Dusk? Well, the partners of Dusk are the venues. Why? Because they need essentially to agree on extending certain particular operations that they do for their clients on Dusk, and those that will create applications on top of Dusk. Now, applications on top of Dusk is another thing that we need to clarify here. For instance, something like whatever kind of layer one or whatever kind of network that is a generalist network that is out there, they need partners. They need a lot of them because essentially nobody knows what these generalist networks are for, right? So in order for them to create adoption, then they need to partner up with this and that. They need to say, hey, there is this application creator that is partnering up with us. We are partnering up with them, and therefore we are going to deploy this application, and the application is going to onboard a lot of different kind of investors. Or users or clients, whatever is that application. That is a partner that has got some sense. We have those, but not many of them. Why? Because Dusk essentially has a very clear vision, which is not a generalist vision. What we want to do is basically taking security assets, actually real world assets. We want to put them on chain. We want to basically make them composable in order to provide different kind of yield to the investors. And we want basically to offer these kind of applications to the investors. So a partnership with Chainlink, which we do have and we did announce, is not really a partnership. It's basically something like we are going to use Chainlink because we need oracles in order to create some trading engine. We need to create some order books. We need to have oracles that has got to do with prices of different kind of assets that do not only live on chain. Why? Because we have the ambition of also putting publicly created and publicly traded stocks on top of Dusk. We are going to use, their CCIP network in order to get these assets here and there. But is Chainlink a partner? I don't think so. We have, as partners, we have venues, and we have few selected different kind of applications that help us to reach our goal. And reaching our goal for us means, one, putting assets, securities on chain, because venues that use Dusk need to be 10-fold, 100-fold cheaper than the centralized counterparty, because otherwise we don't have a reason to exist, right? We have a reason to exist only if basically a decentralized system is better than a centralized one. So until we will have on-chain issuance, on-chain trading of this kind of assets, then we are not really, we are not really in the game. We are working in order for Dusk to be an infrastructure that is much cheaper, much more performant, much better than the centralized counterparty. That's basically what we are doing for. We are not in the game to attract meme coins or tumblers or any other kind of application that you guys can see on other chains, metaverse, gaming, this kind of stuff. We don't care about those, and therefore we don't care about having many different partners. What we care is about having product market fit. We want to put on chain certain particular assets or certain particular application that will give our investors more money, that will make them more money when they invest in these kind of assets. How? Well, simply because it is more convenient and cheaper than what they get from a broker like the Hero or whatever, or because the venue that offers these assets is capable of charging much lesser in fees than centralized counterparty, because they do not have a lot of different brokers fees that basically just get up. Yes, market maker heaven. Yes, indeed. When you are much cheaper, then you attract a lot of different market makers. That's basically something that I hear over and over and over and over again, because they are attracted essentially by they produce volume, and they are attracted by lower costs. So when we're talking about partners, then we are talking about something that furthers this goal. We're not talking about what the other chain basically call partners. And you need to believe about the fact that we are actually just working to put these kind of products online as soon as possible. So we are always listening to the asset managers. We are always listening to regulators. We're not partnering with regulators, but they are, they are essentially people that we have to talk to all the time. And there's nothing wrong with there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying that we talk with regulators and we align with regulators. But certainly it's not as sexy as saying, oh, we partnered up with Vanguard. Yeah. To do what? Vanguard basically creates an asset, and we need investors to invest in that asset. If a Vanguard money market fund costs more on Ampex than it costs on the New York Stock Exchange, then nobody is going to buy it because it costs more. So who the fuck cares that we partner up with Vanguard? So sorry about the rant about partners, but this needed to be said.
I think that was a good clarification, and also a bunch of alpha being spilled right there. So don't worry, guys. I'll make sure to also make a summary of all of this. I know it's a lot of info, but it's a lot of good info that needs to be summarized in really to the point details for you guys afterwards. And I know we have like 7 minutes until the top of the hour, but then there's also a lot of more questions left in the AMA channel. So Emma, you can tell me.
I was 9 minutes late, so we have 16 minutes before the end of the hour.
Superb. Let's get into it because there's a lot more. So the next one is layer 2 EVM deployment in L1 Dusk is resolved with third-party help. That was
correct.
The question.
Yes, that is. We have been engaging with third party because obviously we do not have too much competence related to core development on the EVM, and therefore we needed to bridge the gap by bringing in the team experts in that regard. So indeed, we are collaborating with external development firms that have got a keen expertise in the EVM development. On core development, we're not talking about smart contracts here. We're talking about RPCs. We're talking about the mechanism that are low-level mechanism on the EVM itself, in order to replace the settlement layer that Ethereum is for the EVM with Dusk. The layer 1 Dusk is not EVM compatible, and therefore basically to introduce this kind of compatibility, it's we needed a little bit of help.
Of course, that makes sense. Now the next one is Cryptid has quite a lot of good questions. So this is the first one with a little bit of preface. One of the objectives of Moonlight was to satisfy strict requirements of exchanges, presumably for ownership traceability. Would a future without Moonlight also mean a future where native L1 Dusk will not be supported on exchanges? Are there any other compliance ramifications of removing Moonlight that may not be obvious to us right now, aside from exchange listing?
So this is a very, very, very good question. So thank you for it. It gives me the possibility of talking about it a little bit. So for what concerns Moonlight was indeed introduced in order to mitigate a little bit the scrutiny of, not really of regulators, but more of exchanges and the gatekeeper of liquidity, which is something that unfortunately we need like the next decentralized protocol. So in order to comply with their let's call them internal policies, then we introduced Moonlight. There was also another reason, which basically was the capability of reasoning and to create smart contracts much faster, because creating circuits, zero-knowledge circuits for every single smart contract, and using Phoenix as a as a foundational technology for smart contract basically made it everything quite complicated. So in order to comply to these internal policies and also to make our job a little easier, then Moonlight was created as a data sharding transaction model, so to speak. Now, first of all, we are not planning at this particular point in time to remove Moonlight. Again, this is a strategic goal, and a goal that most likely is very consistent with the strategy of simplification and more maintainability. If we have an EVM execution layer, the EVM execution layer uses the account model itself. So why do we also need Moonlight as an account model on the settlement layer? Well, it maps quite nicely with the EVM account model, and therefore it will remain for the time being, because we need to have bridging between the layer 2 and the layer 1. But at the same time, basically, at some point we might rethink a little bit this. We might need to rethink a little bit this model. For what concerns the liquidity, so exchanges are pretty damn lazy, I have to say. So, and this has got to do with integrating with the wider blockchain community at large. When you have ad hoc tools, then the amount of time that is required in order to integrate these tools into the wider ecosystem bubble up to intolerable timelines. I'll give you a very stupid example. A very, very famous interchain messaging protocol quoted us $500,000 and 7 months of development time in order to basically onboard Dusk layer 1 into their interchain protocol. For what concerns DuskEVM, they quoted us $10,000 and 2 weeks of work. Now, of course, if you are planning to tap into the liquidity of the wider EVM ecosystem, and you have bridges that takes either 7 months or 2 weeks. 7 months, 2 weeks. 7 months, 2 weeks, you go with the 2 weeks. So because of that, then the execution layer based on the EVM is most likely going to be the main, also the holder of the main tokens that the exchanges are going to be integrating with. This is also from a general from a general reasoning. It is more convenient. Why? Because if you are thinking about applications and the application need Dusk for gas, then you want people to be able to get this Dusk in the friendliest possible UX way, right? Either from bridges or from integrating with on-ramp and off-ramp systems, stablecoin and whatnot. So you want your token to essentially be, or the one that gets traded that provides liquidity, to be the one that is the most used on the application layer. So if we are thinking about the utility of the settlement layer, which at the moment is basically native Dusk, then the utility of the settlement layer is basically consensus data availability, which essentially translates into staking, right? So the main utility of the native Dusk at the moment is staking. The main utility of the EVM, side of Dusk is application. So the gas that have got to do with the application and the execution layer, so the app layer, so to speak. And that is the most convenient to basically have very, very close to our users and to our investors. So indeed, our strategy will be to list or to migrate all the ERC20 Dusk and BEP20 Dusk from the legacy part into the EVM Dusk, which is going to be much, much, much simpler for all the different kind of exchanges, and it's not going to, just bump into the internal policy or any other things, because at the moment the native Dusk or the different account-based model and privacy-preserving transaction model is commingled in the same kind of network. So I hope that this answers that question.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it does. And there was also quite a lot of questions from different community members about if there will be a different token on the EVM layer 2. So the answer is it's going to be Dusk, right? It's just going to be
it's Dusk essentially.
Exactly.
So what is going to happen is the fact that basically on the settlement layer, then from an abstract perspective, there is just one token, which is Dusk. Right. But it has different aspects. So the aspect related to the settlement layer and the aspect related to the application layer, and they are going to be freely swappable and interchangeable, as a matter of fact. So there is not going to be another token. It's still Dusk, but with different, different kind of implementation attached to it.
Exactly. Perfect. Now, the second question from Cryptid is, does DuskEVM implementation of FHE rely on any novel techniques? Are they easy for competitors to copy? Does it even make sense for them to copy it?
It does make sense for them to copy it. It uses I'm not sure if it is completely novel. So it uses fully homomorphic encryption, but we add also zero knowledge proofs on top of that, which normally this is not the case. So how this happens at the moment, so all these different kind of providers of fully homomorphic encryption based technology, like for instance there is Zama, is probably the most famous one. There is also another company which is called Phoenix that does roughly the same. They basically use, or they created their own low-level functions on inside of their own tooling system that implements scalar multiplication and all that directly in fully homomorphic encryption. We don't do that. We basically just use fully homomorphic encryption, and we use zero knowledge in order to prove the fully homomorphic encryption. I will need to have a look again at the Hedger paper, but essentially it uses El-Gamal homomorphic encryption based on elliptic cryptography, and El-Gamal is basically just well understood, and I believe also it uses Pedersen commitments. So from a novelty point of view, it is definitely novel. How difficult it is to replicate? Not very difficult, I don't think. It will require somebody with moderate to good skills of in cryptography, and it can be used. But this is also the same. This is also true for any other things that we have been doing. We have been creating Poseidon. Poseidon has been a novelty of Dusk, as a matter of fact, and right now is freely usable by practically everybody. Plonk, same thing. Zelbet, same thing. Everything that we do is open source and freely available. That's not where our USP is. So we are actually happy when people or when other organizations start to use our own novelties, because it means basically that they are sound and they get more secure if somebody else look at them, and most importantly uses them. So that's our point. You guys need not to worry at all about competition, because there isn't really any other chain or any other protocol out there which operates under a full MTF and broker license. That is basically our moat, so to speak, which it's not easy to overcome. Why? Because you don't have a protocol that is very intimately connected with a regulated venue with the right licenses, and there is no regulated venue with the right licenses that is exclusive to a protocol. So essentially, you have protocols that are used by probably a regulated entity, but there are many of those, and they don't really talk to each other, and there isn't really somebody that is well focused on that. You have applications that are based on top of the protocol, but normally this application can never compete with Dusk because Dusk is a protocol, and therefore we make our own rules, we make our own fees. Whereas the applications, basically, they inherit all the different things on top of the protocol that they are deployed upon. And normally they cannot really compete, because if they have a token, then that token can only do governance, because the layer one or the network that they use is not, they don't have any control over it. And there is always this kind of thing: application that has its own business model that is normally incompatible with the protocol, and then the venue. So you have the venue and the application, something in between, and the two don't talk directly. On Dusk, that is not the case. We have the venue, we have the protocol. So the applications on top of the protocol, essentially, they inherit immediately the compliance, the cost efficiency, the very low fee of all the different kind of regulated different kind of operations that the base layer puts at them at their disposal. So that is really the motto of Dusk. It's not cryptography. We want our novelties and our technology to be used by anyone, any other organization, as many as possible.
Got it. I know it's 10 minutes past, and Emma, if you have a bit more time, we can go through a couple more questions. If not, you can let me know, and we can continue next time with the rest of the questions.
I have 10 more minutes. Then
okay.
I will need to go, but 10 more minutes I can.
Appreciate that. Then the next one from Cryptid is, will the community play a role in the rollout of DuskEVM? Are there any testing phases we might participate in, or any opportunities to run a validator? If not, are any of Dusk's partners helping to run the infrastructure, or is it all Dusk Foundation at this point?
It is all Dusk Foundation at this point. We are... this is probably a question more for Hein than for me, to be honest. I think that we are definitely going to go for some kind of testnet, but keep in mind that we are not creating a new network that didn't really exist, and we redid the EVM from scratch. No, we basically just took optimism in this case, and we readapted optimism to our own needs. But 95 to 98% of the code of optimism is untouched, so we don't really need too much testing to see that execution layer is in fact working. What we will require to test is basically the settlement layer, right? And for that there will be some testing phase, but the testing phase is going to be quite limited. As for basically the role of the community, definitely you guys can run validators. But at the very beginning, we are going with a sequencing that is probably quite simple in nature. Most probably centralized, but with the intention, to open it up to the community as soon as we can. Time is of the essence. I am more interested in basically getting applications up and running on the execution layer as soon as possible, rather than basically just making sure that the infrastructure of the execution layer is also quite advanced. Let me put it that way. The community, again, the decentralization part is provided at the settlement layer, which is where it stands, and that is where we need the community basically to help with the decentralization and to run their own part of the infrastructure. how the sequencing is going to look like, I demand or I delegate the answer to this question to Hein, and I'll make sure that basically he will join the next one, so you guys can ask him directly.
That should be a fun one. I know a lot of the community is missing Hein right now, so that sounds fun. The next question is sorry.
I said he is hard at work.
He's quite full, but working on exciting stuff. So you guys will be happy that he's taking the time to work full time on this and not showing it too much attention now. But don't worry, it's going to be worth it. Next one. How significant are the changes to the L1 that permit DuskEVM interoperability? Will there be a disruptive upgrade procedure for the L1 when DuskEVM lands?
There is not going to be a disruptive update, but there is definitely going to be one. So there will be, basically we are introducing a new transaction for the proto-dunk sharding in order for the data availability data sorry, to be stored on the layer 1. But that is not going to go through PyCrust. It's going to be embedded directly in the binary. And then we are going to deploy a contract, which is going to be the bridge contract between the layer 1 and the layer 2. And those are mainly the two. Well, there is a third one, of course. There is also a third change, which has got to do with exposing the same APIs that at the moment the settlement layer for Optimism is exposing, but that is also going to be included in the binary. So there is going to be a binary upgrade as well as basically a deployment of the new contract, but there is not going to be any migration procedure because we are not going to change the Genesis contract.
The next question is, for holders who've stayed in Dusk purely on conviction, in brackets, not hype, what's your honest message now, seeing the current market cap and rankings, and in brackets, no angry answer, please?
So I believe that at this particular moment is quite a difficult moment for any kind of altcoin. I'm not talking only about Dusk. I mean, we can look at the market cap and compare it with other altcoins, with anybody basically, and perhaps Dusk has been dropping more than the others because of several different reasons. One of these reasons is the fact that we are perceived as lagging behind. We are essentially still vaporware because there is absolutely no asset on chain at this particular point in time. I also made a mistake myself, which was the publishing of a new roadmap with timelines. Actually, not even timelines, with items that in fact changed. And that is something that, is a mistake that I made, and a mistake that came after, a quite substantial delays in putting out our mainnet. That said, I believe that basically our current market cap is due to the fact that despite the many different kind of exciting progress that we are aware of, and that I see, that create really a lot of excitement also with partners when I'm talking to them. There isn't really anywhere where to drive hype right? So let's say, for instance, that we create a marketing campaign. Right now, we pour, I don't know, whatever, unbounded money on top of it. And we announce, that our president is Donald J. Trump, right? Great. That would probably just spike our market cap for a day or two, and then what? There isn't really, apart from staking, there isn't really an application that achieve product market fit where we can channel, where we can funnel all the different kind of hype or marketing activities. There aren't assets right now that you can purchase on Dusk. You cannot really implement smart contracts, also because the execution layer is not done yet. And we would prefer not to have contracts on the layer one right now because it's going to be a settlement layer, except for Soju. And the reason is that Soju essentially has a protocol which is very, very, very close to the functionality that the settlement layer provides, which is staking. So that is absolutely, we are very happy to have them deploying on the layer one. So because of that, then I am very aware about the fact that not only we need to put assets on chain to give investors the capability of buying these assets, not even buying these assets, the capability of actually making money through the applications that are deployed on Dusk, because that's basically what this is about. Stablecoin, yield-bearing stablecoin like Ondo, which are backed by real assets that are unlinked on the overall crypto market, which right now looks cooked from the outside and very exhausted. And the narrative, for VCs and anything else just moved from crypto to AI. Right now, basically what we need is solid money-making applications that are on the execution layer. So because of that, this is essentially what how we morphed into our strategies onto, and why basically we are working in a very pragmatic fashion. This is product market fit season. I completely agree, and I believe that actually we have a very strong set of different kind of application that will prove that that anybody that is really interested in making solid gains and solid yield, then they can come to Dusk to do so. So I do believe that our capability to rebuild our brand and to proceed to conquer more and more shares of the market depends on bringing assets to the network, and that is basically what we are focusing on. So no bullshit, no infrastructure stuff. We are essentially just pragmatically looking at creating applications, bridging as much liquidity as possible from anywhere we can, creating a user interface which is very simple to use from anyone, and giving anybody the capability basically of putting their own money at work in order to gain yield, not from the marketing budget or from token casino, but from actual businesses or actual financial products. And creating also the same kind of composability of DeFi on assets that essentially we only can put online because of the regulatory status that we have. So until that happens, I believe that we will essentially that this is a conviction play. We're not very far, so that is the good news. And I have been restraining myself from publishing more roadmaps because at this point in time, I don't think that they would help. But I hope that these kind of spaces, me talking and answering questions, provide also the perspective and very precise updates on the progress and on the intentions that we have. So I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate anybody at this particular point in time that is still committed to Dusk and is going through these very interesting times together with us. We are very well equipped to just to execute on pragmatism, let me put it that way. And I also do believe that we are taking all the different steps from a technology perspective, but also from a business development perspective. We just need to execute at this point in time.
Great. I think that's a really good message to end it on. And like Anesi said, this is product market fit season, and we are getting there as soon as possible. We're working towards that and putting all of our efforts into it. And I do want to echo Emanuele and just thank everyone that stayed this whole hour and 15 minutes or however much it was with us. And I also want to thank Emanuele for taking the time to do these spaces. I think it really brings a lot of value for the community. I have got a lot of positive messages from the community. So thank you, Emanuele, for that. And thank you for everyone that stayed with us. I will provide a summary tomorrow, most probably, as it is almost 7 p.m. here. But I'll provide that and the recording as well. This time it should be smooth. And we will also work on putting the recording from last week online so you guys can go back and listen to that as well. We didn't yet because there were some technical issues, but that's fixed. So it should all be good now. Emma, if you want to say anything else as a closing, you can go ahead.
No, I want to thank everybody that is here, and thank you for your questions. They always give me very good ground to elaborate and to and also to put orders in my thoughts sometimes. So it's I think this is a very enjoyable space for me. Also to talk with the community. I think it's also quite efficient to do so in a talked form rather than me typing, which I have been doing for years in our beloved Telegram or less beloved Telegram channel. So I actually like a lot this format. If you guys like it too, then we will keep doing so. Thank George for organizing, and I'll see you next week, or if Hein is going to take next week, the week after.
Superb. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. And I also enjoyed this format much more interesting and interactive than the written one. So this is great. Thanks all. Have a good day, rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next one.